To see everyone. Come on into the chat. Start lining up your questions. We're going to get started today. As the United States rolls out the various vaccines for its citizens across the country, the discussion has been centered around adults, particularly 65 and older, essential workers, and people with pre-existing conditions. But what about our children, who can also become infected just like any of us adults? And they're trying to get back into school as they're reopening schools and trying to reopen schools. And kids just want desperately to just play with each other again. So this evening we have with us pediatrician Jennifer Walton to talk to us a little bit about the vaccine and our kids. And put your questions in the chat so she can answer some of your questions as well. So Jennifer, welcome. Dr. Walton, glad to have you.
Glad to be here. Hi, everybody.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself first before you dive into your presentation, and then we get on to our discussion?
Sure. So, hello, everybody. Aren't we glad it hit 50 degrees today? I'm Dr. Jennifer Walton, and I am a developmental behavioral pediatrician. So, I did complete pediatric residency, and I'm board certified in general pediatrics, but also developmental and behavioral pediatrics. And that focuses more on children with special needs. So, whether that's autism, intellectual disabilities, and a variety of developmental and motor disabilities. And so that's my area of focus. However, I also work within Columbus at a couple main institutions. I'm also a member of the National Medical Association, which is a predominant African American physician organization. And so I am a member of Columbus's chapter of NMA, and I am chair of the pediatric section for the National Medical Association. And so it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you all. I do have a mini presentation, only 5 slides. And so then we'll be able to have plenty of time to chat and talk. And I loved Carla's intro because you're absolutely right that children are totally affected by this directly, whether it's infected with COVID or indirectly with everything else going on in society. So I'm very glad we're touching on this topic.
Excellent. So why don't we just dive right in? We'll put up your presentation, and you can get started.
Great. So as soon as it's up, I can start talking now because the first slide is the title slide, welcome. And then as that slide's coming up, I'm going to then hit into what our current numbers are, and then what current information we have now, and then what more information we need to gather. And then I'm going to end with what we're going to do next, which I know we're already doing. So yes, you can already advance. This is our first slide, so you can advance to the next slide. Excellent. So these are the current numbers in pediatrics, so in children. So I wanted to give what exactly are the current statistics, you would say. And so right now in the United States, as of February 18th, we've had over 3.1 million cases of children having COVID-19. That's actually 13.1% of all the COVID-19 cases in the United States. And so if you think about it as a rate, for every 100,000 children, there's actually over 4,100 cases of COVID-19 in children. So I just want you to think about that and put it in that perspective. Then also we have deaths. So as of yesterday, last evening, from the current data I checked, there have been 88 children who've passed away ages 0 to 4 years, and then 237 children ages 5 to 17 years that have passed away. So now let's focus on Ohio, where we are. And so right now, our data as of yesterday, sorry, I did not get the 2 o'clock data yet, so we're going by yesterday. In Ohio, we've had 122,797 cases of children having COVID-19. This is actually 1,141 hospitalizations, and we've had 11 deaths. So I just wanted to put that in perspective that yes, children can get COVID-19. Yes, technically you're right that overall, they may be more mild cases, but as we know, it doesn't matter, mild, moderate, severe, they can get it and they can transmit it, they can spread it. So it contributes to the overall community spread, which is why it's important we need to focus on our children. You can advance to the next slide. Excellent. And so right now, as I know most of us should know, there are two approved vaccines. I'm actually going to focus on the two approved ones. Yes, today we may have heard that Johnson and Johnson's vaccine, the single shot, is being pushed for emergency use authorization, which may occur hopefully this weekend. But I'm going to focus on the two that are right now have the emergency use authorization, or EUA, they call it. The first one, which was created by Pfizer and biotech, and that one is 2 doses that are 21 days apart. It is an mRNA vaccine. I'm hoping a lot of us learned about mRNA, which is different from DNA, and that mRNA is the messenger. It carries the instructions. So to be honest, I'll stop here. mRNA sort of carries the instructions for all of our DNA to create the proteins. So in this case, for coronavirus, it has a spike. And so the mRNA message in this is, how are we going to produce this spike so our immune systems know, okay, this spike is not of us, we need to get rid of it, right? So that's the purpose of the mRNA vaccines. That's the purpose of the creation of those. And so Pfizer has one, it's 95% effective. And this one's been approved for children, for adults and individuals ages 16 years of age and over. Now we have Moderna. Moderna is also a 2-dose vaccine, 28 days apart, also an mRNA vaccine, pretty effective at 94%, approved for ages 18 years and older. I will also say for Johnson & Johnson, when that eventually gets its EUA, or emergency use authorization, that will also be approved for individuals 18 years of age and older. So we still got a ways to go on Johnson & Johnson. So next slide. Spend some time on that one so we can go to the next one. Excellent. Because there's the big question, right? This is what people in the chat and probably everybody's wondering, parents, caregivers, grandparents, and so forth. When's it going to be my child's turn, right? That's the goal. And so right now, the short answer is not yet, unless you're 16 years of age and older, then there could be some opportunities. Right now, there are a couple studies involving children and enrolling children ages 12 years and up. Some say the goal is hopefully in the next couple months, we're going to enroll children from a few companies that want to enroll children younger than age 12 years, maybe as low as age 5, some are saying, to really see exactly, what is the effect in children. And I'm going to stop here because the goal is, we just don't want children enrolling from a certain group or a certain population. We really need a diverse number of participants, of children involved in these trials, because that's going to give us the best understanding of how children and individuals, no matter what your background is, no matter your race, ethnicity, cultural identity, and background, we need to get that understanding and get that information so we know exactly how safe and how effective it is everywhere. That's the goal. And so definitely, just like there has been diversity in the adult trials of participants, we need that in the children as well. Based on all of those results and based on how safe and effective that vaccine is, that's going to then determine probably some questions that may be coming in the chat. So for example, will the vaccine be available before this next academic year, before the 2021-2022 academic year? That's been a common question that's actually come across the medical field in a lot of areas. And so that's why we're looking forward to the results. And I will say, when it comes to the fall, we can't give a solid answer right now, but our hope is that maybe certain age groups could be able to get the vaccine maybe by the fall. That's a future goal. People are trying to push for that. But of course, we're following the rules. There are no shortcuts. Another question that may come is, all right, whenever it is approved, is my school going to require, that my child gets the vaccine? Because of course, there's been a lot of, information out there, and just before COVID and before the pandemic, schools do have certain rules in terms of you need to have certain vaccinations before you can enter the school. We also have to remember that after health authorities have reviewed, that's actually a state regulation, so it's not a federal regulation. And so states determine, and so it can vary state by state in terms of, these schools, these are the mandated vaccines for this school. So we have to wait for what Ohio wants to do whenever they approve that. And so that right now is where we are currently. I know it probably doesn't, it may not satisfy everybody. Like, we want more information. That's why we got to wait. And of course, we Christians, we New Salem, we're going to wait patiently. So next slide. And so, of course, we got to rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. Romans 12:12. So as we wait patiently, what are we going to do in the meantime? Because even though some of us, so I have been fully vaccinated. I will say that I have received 2 doses. And so, and more of us are getting vaccinations. That does not stop me from wearing my mask and really wearing it correctly, meaning cover the nose and the mouth, not just the mouth. Let's please do that. Let's keep up with the hand hygiene, right? Let's wash our hands with soap and water and or use the hand sanitizer for at least 20 seconds. I think a lot of us have realized, I would say, before the pandemic, and hopefully, we were washing and doing things thoroughly before. But I mean, the shortcuts and how people wash their hands and use the sanitizer is real. And so we really need to reinforce that, okay? Keep our distance. And social distancing's come up commonly, but as we know, we have still been able to socially connect at a physical distance. So I like still using the word physically distant because we want to keep our distance, but still we can socially connect. And let's not also forget, I'm now going to go holistically here. We want to make sure as we're eating healthy, all our children and everyone, healthy eating, physical activity. It's now starting to get warmer. We can still be distant, but outside. Let's get active. Let's make sure our children are active. Keeps their minds focused and motivated. And that's important in the next one on continuing to maintain a regular daily schedule and routine, specifically sleep. When this pandemic first hit, all of us, I got lazy, everybody got lazy. And, we all had to, sleep in some days, or we lost track of just what our regular schedule is. And it's important to bring that back, specifically a good restful sleep, quality sleep. That's really important to the overall holistic health of a child and the health of an individual. Last one I'll focus on is appointments. In terms of, whether your child sees a primary care pediatrician, family practice doctor, we want to make sure we still don't forget about the overall health of our children, the overall general health of our children, and the other vaccines that have generations of data and research behind them, right? Let's still make sure we keep our well child, our annual physicals and appointments. And I say that because just like we're trying to make sure the community is, vigilant in all of these areas that are on this slide, physicians' offices have put up strict protocols like never before. Hardly any waiting rooms exist in physicians' offices. Like, let's just be honest, right? So the goal is we are trying to make sure we have all our safety protocols in place. So whenever you come, we are making sure and ensuring your safety. That is always the utmost goal. And so please make sure you bring your children to their doctor's appointments. It's best to do that. Telehealth is great. And I know a lot of us have gone to telehealth options, and it's been great. And specifically for families, I know I see families that are a couple hours away, and it has been great. But then I'm going to be honest, the digital divide is real. Not everyone is able to use technology. Not everyone is able to afford it for a variety of reasons, some of them out of our control, right? And so that's why it's important. I don't want to underestimate the importance of seeing a child physically. I see them, through a video, but I always like to see a child physically. It makes the most sense to me, and I can get the most information. And so that's why I want to make sure, don't forget the rest of our health, because that's important to our children. I'll end there because I know where our main focus was, but thank you for letting me pivot. But you see, I told you I kept it short so that way we can make sure we can have a lot of conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's see if we have any questions. I know I have some questions, and I'm sure Paige does as well. So, Paige, any questions in the chat yet?
For sure. So, will children who have already had COVID be considered now for the vaccine?
Be considered now. So right now, maybe not now because the vaccine technically does not, it's not approved for children yet. But I will say, and at least in adults, there have been adults who've had COVID, right? Who will, in some cases, they may check their antibody levels, or they may say just wait a little bit in terms of before it's time. I think it will depend on the age of the child, whether the child has any pre-existing conditions, as is an adult as well, and whether you meet the eligibility requirement of the state. So as you know, Ohio goes through phases, right? So let's say a 50-year-old, had COVID, right? And so they had COVID, but right now, for the vaccine, they're still not eligible yet, right? And so they're going to still have to wait per the process of the state. Now, when it is time for them, I bet time has passed by where they are eligible and can go get the vaccine, because we still would probably still insure it because we don't know yet how long the immunity will last, right? So I got the vaccine. We know after the second dose of a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, after like 7 to 14 days, we know immunity is set. Now, how long that will last, time is going to tell, and that's why we're still doing research. So the same would apply for children once they're eligible.
Okay, that makes sense. If I'm walking outside by myself, do I need to wear a mask?
So I'll say this. When I walk outside and I'm by myself, I wear a mask. I just take no chances, because sometimes I have accidentally, it's been rare, but I have accidentally, I think I'm walking in a grocery store or I'm in an office and I realize I'm like, oh, and then I run back because you never know. So I will say I was walking somewhere last week. I won't say where, but I was walking somewhere, had on my mask. Another person was leaving probably their job. Didn't have a mask on because you never know who someone can automatically appear. At that time, that person just already knew to back off and just like take steps back and keep more distance, because they knew I was coming and I was not going to stop because I was doing things right. And so in my opinion, if you're going anywhere, walking anywhere, have a mask. Please wear a mask. Just better be safe than sorry. You never know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm glad you reinforced that.
Yeah,
Any
I do
others?
that a lot.
Because you think you're
So
by yourself, and you may be, but you never know when someone else is going to show up, and like, because they may think they're by themselves too. So just be on the cautious side and just wear a mask.
yeah.
I had a
So
neighbor walk up to me and do that. You walk out to take the trash out, you think you're good, and then all of a sudden you look up and there's your neighbor, and he didn't have a mask on either. I'm like, oh, yeah. So you're
Like,
absolutely
please.
right.
Yes.
yeah. So there's been news of a third vaccine option. How do people / their doctors know which version of the vaccine is best for them?
So great question. Right. So there's a third vaccine option. It's not yet ready for approval. Well, it's getting close. So it's been endorsed, but now it has to go through another advisory committee for a final approval. They're thinking this weekend. Technically, all versions, I consider them equal, because the goal is, I will say they're all equal. With this third vaccine option, the data is still coming out. It may not be as 94 and 95% effective in terms of compared to the Pfizer or Moderna. At the same time, though, this next vaccine coming out, they say could actually be preventive in a lot of other areas in terms of preventing severe COVID-19 disease and transmission, which is a new one. And so that's why I say in this case, it's equal, meaning if you can get a vaccine, please get a vaccine. I will say right now, between Pfizer and Moderna, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. I had one version. I had a relative have the opposite version. We had the same effects. It doesn't matter. Equal across the board.
Okay. Yeah. Carla, did you have any questions to throw in?
Just how soon do you think it will be until there's something, a vaccine for children? Do you think we're another year out, or?
That's a great question. There is wishful thinking, and maybe I shouldn't say it like that, but the goal is we're pushing hard to see if certain age groups, I think the goal is they're trying to see if adolescents, could we get a vaccine in time for the upcoming fall academic year? That's what they're trying. But please note, though that's the wish, they're still going to follow their due diligence in making sure they go through every phase of research. So they don't want to shortcut and drive, because then mistakes can happen, as we know. So that's why we're trying to make sure they follow through. For younger kids, it may not be till next year. I'll be honest, it may not be, because we really got to be diligent. I know people believe, a lot of this research has been fast paced. mRNA vaccines are such a different type of vaccine compared to others, where it's been able to do that, but you still got to follow the protocols and the rules. And I think what's been helpful when the pandemic hit is that everyone was on accord, right? Private companies, the government, they're like, we're going to work together. And that's what sped up processes, I believe. And so that helped in a major way. So I understand and I sympathize, and you're right. We definitely want our children protected at all costs. Totally. We get that. My dream is we can try to see if some age groups can get it later this year and then the rest next year. That is probably the future goal. But we're gonna keep trudging along.
Have you had many, anyone infected, any children infected with COVID-19 come into your practice?
So that's great question. So we actually, there was a possible exposure. I remember when one patient checked in, and then we followed specific protocols. Child was in a separate room. We laid it out. PPE was on a whole other level. Usually, though, families have been great and have let us know in advance, like we've been exposed or family had COVID, and so we're going to convert to a telehealth visit. Which is fine. I have had some children who have had the infection. Actually, I was with them in a telehealth visit, a video visit, and some children handled it beautifully. And it was great to see. I know there were some children that were hospitalized. I know some children whose family members actually had it. It was pretty significant. I have had some children where they were concerned because a family member totally got it. And then actually a family member passed away. And so there were some other things we had to talk about. So it speaks to, you're right, I'm glad we're talking on this topic, because the child may not have directly been impacted, but indirectly with other family members, that's a whole nother level. That's a serious level of grief and almost trauma that, the child's going to endure. And so that's why this is really important. We're talking about this. So yeah, it's been a mix.
Yeah, that's the tough part about it is, these children have been going through this for now a year now, and they're seeing the deaths. And even if it's not within their household, they understand what's going on even around the world. How do parents deal with that? How do you talk to your kids about COVID-19 and its effect on individuals, even possibly themselves?
Right. No, that's a great question. I think that's been the question of the year. This pandemic and COVID, as well as other, important issues that have occurred in this nation, have played a serious effect on our children. I want to make sure, and I've talked with children about it recently, as well as throughout the year. I want them to be open and honest, right? I want children to be open and let it out. I never want a child internalizing or keeping inside how they feel, because that actually can hurt them more, and actually it can hurt them physically, because it can come out in other ways. When a child is, and it goes to the bigger picture, it builds up anxiety, it can build up depression. And we know in children that actually they may not always have those classic symptoms of anxiety and depression. Sometimes they can become agitated, quite irritable, and you're wondering where it's coming from. And so that's why it's important that have honest conversations, right? It's okay for the child to be mad, be angry, be upset, have moments to cry, have moments to be sad. They will need time, but make sure there's always open communication and say, you're right, this is a tough time. This is tough. We're all going through this together. But let us know how you feel, and let us know we're going to work through it day by day. Sometimes break it out in terms of baby steps, in terms of how, this is one thing I'm going to focus on today, in terms of if a kid has to do homework, if it's a school age kid, they're struggling to focus because they have so much other stuff on their mind. So how, let's focus on maybe just completing this type of assignment right now. Let's hold off on everything else. Baby steps, routines. I will make sure, Carla, you get information later. There's actually some great books, great diverse books for all different backgrounds that I do want to recommend. I'm so sorry because I didn't know the conversation. In some ways, I should have known that, though. The conversation was going to go in this direction. But no, there are a couple great books I do want to recommend in terms of talking to children about COVID. And then I can go on a tangent on talking to children about race. I mean, because that's another thing too, that we can hit on too. And there's some great resources. Only because I work there also, Nationwide Children's Hospital. If you go to their website, they do have specific blog and post and additional resources in terms of how to talk to your children about COVID, how to cope through it. There's a great book that I do recommend for children that have anxiety and that worry and go in it. Specifically, if your child is ages 6 through 12 years, it's called What to Do When You Worry Too Much. It's a kid's guide on how to overcome anxiety. And it involves a lot of cognitive behavior therapy techniques, which is the classic type of therapy component. And so that is helpful too. But I'll make sure, Carla, probably like within the next 24 hours, you will get those resources.
Okay, wonderful. And you know what? I'm thinking even as an adult, I probably should read that that book. You know, we all have taken in so much anxiety, you know, based on everything that we've dealt with this year. Paige, any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, for sure. I know, Jennifer, you brought up that you have already gotten your vaccine. So someone asked, what side effects did you have, and did you receive both doses?
Yes. So number one, yes, I did receive both doses. First dose, just had a little arm soreness and I was fine. Second dose, I did experience some pain, some, I would say, like malaise. Like I felt like, I use this term a lot with my friends and colleagues, like blah. I just felt like I can't do anything, and so I was like blah. It was interesting though. After just taking Tylenol, it lasted for me about 24 hours, and then I bounced back. And I was fine. I actually went to work feeling like that, but I was able to, take Tylenol, and I was doing well. I did not have a fever. I did not have chills. I just had some aches and pains and just felt just like a sense of, oof, like what is happening to me, which, is my immune system. It kicked in and said, what is this? What are you giving me? And so I'm going to fight it. And so that's what happened. And I know with another relative of mine, the same situation happened with the other version of the vaccine. I will say, though, I have another relative, a much older relative, who just finished having his second vaccine, and he had no symptoms at all, not a bit on either. So it's been a bit. And that was a much older Black man who had nothing. so it completely is random, and that's why it's important for as many of us, if we can get involved in the trials and the studies, and that way they can document the reactions that can occur. That's so important, because even within Black people, within other cultures, totally different experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long would you say
Oh, go ahead, Paige. You got another one?
Oh, I was just going to ask you, with your symptoms, you said no fever or anything, but how long would you say the soreness? Is it like a regular shot, just a couple days, or was it weeks?
So no, definitely not weeks. No, for me, I'm glad you said weeks though, because there's something I want to mention about that. But for me, it was about 24 hours. So after about 24 to 36 hours, I was fine. That was for me. I will say I've had other sibling and another colleague where after about 48 to 72 hours, then they were fine. I remember when I did get my vaccine, and I'm hoping it happens for most people, that when you get the vaccine, they actually have you sit on the side for about 15 minutes, because they do want to make sure that you don't have a true allergic or what's called anaphylactic reaction, because they want to intervene very quickly. So that's usually the rule for any dose, first or second. They actually want to monitor you for 15 to 20 minutes. So you're not doing anything, because they just want to see if something's going to happen. So that is the rule. That's what should be occurring. And then what also happens is there's vaccine safety programs. And I remember there was a national one, Be Safe, where you could sign up for it. If you have your cell phone, or there's a place where you could just put in your email. And what happens is each day, so I'm glad you said weeks day, because each day you're going to get a text saying it's time for you to let us know how you're feeling. And they're going to ask in terms of, are you having any symptoms? Or do you have any fever? Do you have any pain? Is it mild? Is it moderate? They're going to ask all of those. It's very quick. In under 3 minutes, the questions are done. But that way they know. And so I signed up for that and recorded that. So that I got the text. I put in my information. I said, this is how I was feeling. Not a fan of it. Or now I'm better. I'm good. And they're like, thank you for your information. So that way they can pull and exactly see how many people are having symptoms or not.
Yeah. That's neat. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yes.
Carla, what were
And
you
let
going to
us know.
say?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Walton. What were you going to say?
Oh, no. I was agreeing with Paige. Like that's what should be happening. And so it's called Be Safe. And so whenever it's your turn to get the vaccine, ask about Be Safe. They should know what that means and should give you the link and the information.
Great. Do you know anything about the trials? Any trials that are going on, in our vicinity or in our region?
I know the Ohio State University, there were researchers there that were part of a couple of it may be the Johnson & Johnson one coming out now. If not, I know there's another company. I know they have been involved with some of the trials. I know there may be another city in Ohio, another possibly children's hospital, as well as us. Maybe I don't know all the particulars about us yet because I'm not in the infectious disease division. But I know I know earlier last year, that's when I knew a pediatric trial was happening because I knew of some other children that were enrolling in the study.
Okay.
So that's how I knew. And so that was happening in the Midwest. And so I don't know. I was not aware of any happening right here in Columbus, but correct me if I'm wrong. If there is one, it's fabulous, and please enroll. If your child's eligible, enroll them because it's great. And that way we know. I saw a 12-year-old saying he was enrolled and got the shot. And so we'll see what he got, the COVID or the placebo.
Okay. Can you explain that actually when the trial, the versus, the actual COVID versus the placebo?
Right. And so usually with trials, and there's different types of studies. So I will say this, there's different types of studies. That's a whole other lecture for another day. But the goal is you want randomized controlled trials, right? So you want two groups. You want a group that's receiving the experimental or the actual treatment in terms of whatever that is. And then you have a comparison, which is really more just, it's not going to be harmful, but we know it's not going to do anything like that. That's the purpose of it. And so the goal is you don't know what you're getting. Only the researcher does, but technically blinded because they're not there. It's a random, like, boom. It could be computerized or a random allocation. This child gets it, this child doesn't. And it's not like, and please don't think like, oh, the white child got it, the black child didn't. Don't think like that, because there are black children that did get it, black individuals that did get it, and there are whites who didn't get it. And so that is important. It's completely random. And the goal is they follow them, right? So they get the shot or they get whatever treatment, and then you monitor any symptoms, any effects, anything, and then they continue to be followed and monitored for months. And so even those from like spring of last year, they're still followed. They're still followed and probably they'll have antibodies checked, they'll have different blood work checked, and they'll still be interviewed and asked further questions from both groups to then see anything happen, nothing happen, something happen, but that's the goal. And usually with these trials, because we don't know how long immunity lasts, they're going to be followed for years. That's what's going to happen. Okay. So even for children, whenever their studies occur, they're going to be followed for years.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking for parents, that's a tough decision to make. The importance of it, but should I, bring my child to a trial like that? And that it can help your children as well as others. Can you just speak a little bit about just the thought process that goes into doing, participating in a trial like that, especially with your child?
Of course. So a couple things I'll talk about that since we're going in a research question, which is fine. I'm glad we are. And so whenever you participate in any type of trial, any type of research trial, there is always an informed consent process, which means you go through a series of questions and they lay it out in detail what the project is or the study is. What is the goal and the purpose? And then what are side effects or contraindications? And why they feel with this study, which usually I should have said this before, any study that occurs, any research project that occurs has to be approved by a board or a specific scientific board. When it comes to any hospital or any university, that's called an institutional review board. So back in the day, right before when the Tuskegee incident and all of that occurred, I might as well bring it up. That didn't exist. right?
Mhm.
We didn't have regulations in place.
Right.
We've come a
Right.
long way. And for years, even since I've been in training and before that, it's clear the regulations and rules, and they will shut projects down when they feel someone's going to be at risk and someone's going to be
Mhm.
harmed, or we're just not satisfied with how you conducted or created that study and that protocol. So I'm going to be honest on that. And specifically when it comes to children, they're considered what's called a vulnerable population because their brains are
Mhm.
still developing. They're still
Right.
growing, and they take that very seriously. And so now coming back to this, there's what's clear and what has to happen in part of the approved process for a study. What is your informed consent? What is this parent going to read and understand? Also included in that consent is that at any moment, a participant can withdraw. That usually can
Mhm.
happen with mostly any project. So say you agree and
Mhm.
you feel like over time, like, I'm not a fan, I wish to withdraw. You have that right and you can withdraw. That at least,
Okay.
so I have a couple of research studies. They're not actually related to any needles, any blood work, anything like that. But I always tell the family and that parent, you can withdraw your child. We can stop it at any moment. And you have that right. And usually they're like, okay, cool. And so I want to make sure people know that you can be involved and enrolled and know that with the rules, you can withdraw. If you feel something's not right or a situation happened, you can't continue on, understood. It's fine. Withdraw from the study. It's cool.
Mhm. Nice. Paige, do we have any other questions?
Definitely. Do you think the vaccine will be a requirement for children starting school like kindergarten?
Yeah. So, so yeah, so if, and I don't know if they were there for the slide earlier, but so that's going to be up to each state. So what happens is this. So let's say, for instance, at some point, vaccine gets approved, right? The vaccine is approved for children. Boom, it's going to happen. Health officials nationally, other organizations, they're going to give their recommendations, and then it comes down to the state. So state by state determines their rules and regulations. I would say from a public health standpoint, probably based on what we've been enduring, could it, will I be surprised if it becomes mandated? I won't be surprised. I will also not be surprised if there are definitely parents who are not going to be a fan and wish to, try to you say like, my child, I did not prefer my child to have it. Just know that when it comes from a public health standpoint, right? You know, we sometimes have to think, and us as Christians, sometimes it's not always about us, right? It's about everybody. And so we have to be a team on this effort. So I'm thinking in terms of other vaccines that have already been approved and we know are mandated, and there's a reason why certain infectious diseases don't exist anymore is because those vaccines have existed for a reason. So right now the answer is I don't know, because we have to wait for the approval and how safe and effective it is and how well is the immune response, and did community spread really decrease down to a significant level. That's what will determine it. And I think once we go through all the rules and regulations and the CDC, and I'm a fellow of the American Academy of Peds and the National Medical Association, there are so many advisory boards that are going to look at that so carefully. That's going to make a decision and help the states then determine what they want to do. And I'll say states in terms of schools, I'm going to say public schools, because we know private schools can do their own thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm, that's interesting.
Any other
So,
questions?
mhm. So someone got their first vaccine dose today. They're
Okay.
wondering, do they have any protection as of now?
You may have some. It's definitely not 94, 95%. I'll tell you that right now. It's not. So you do have some protection, but that's why the second dose is needed for the 94, 95%, whether it's Pfizer or Moderna. So right now you may have some, but don't hang on it, and please wear your mask still.
Okay. Yeah. So someone's wondering what advice you would give for people of color who are skeptical about getting vaccinated due to our history.
History. And you're right. Um, I want to speak on some part of the history, specifically maybe the Tuskegee incident. And if we think about it, that was actually a denial of treatment. right? Because treatment actually existed for syphilis. In that case, it wasn't given; it was denied, right? And so, for whatever reason at that time, and it was wrong. And so, since then, this is about now in terms of how are we really going to help us move forward and really evolve in such a way? Before the pandemic, we already know we, people of color, have been at risk for so many diseases and so many conditions. And we are at risk of dying of so many diseases and so many conditions at younger age ranges, at shorter lifespans, right? And so we know this. And just as we promote and desire our children and our grandchildren to be great in all different professions, right? We have a lot of great diversity where we're trying to improve and diversify the workforce in the medical field. So I love that a Black female scientist was behind the making of the Moderna vaccine, who understood that, right? And I like that we've had increased diversity in some of the trials that led to the emergency approval of some of these vaccines, because now we have an idea of how the vaccine can affect us because we've been involved in those trials, right? And because there have been now 500,000 deaths from COVID, let's not forget that, right? And definitely a good amount of them were us. This is our opportunity to really step out on faith and really give it to God and say, you know what, I'm going to do this for my family, right? So I knew I was going to, and I'll be honest, I was a little hesitant too when this all started. And then I realized on behalf of my family, I said, you know what, this isn't about me. This isn't about me at all. I need to do this for my family. I really do. So me and then another relative, we're like, you know what, we're going to step out. We're going to do this for our family. And then it followed suit. And then I told them these were my side effects. This is what happened. And you're going to be all right. And so that's how this started. And so I will say, step out on faith, still pray on it. Just like my last slide said, you know, we're going to do Romans 12:12, and we're going to do what we can, not just for us, but for us as a community, because our communities have been hit hard. And this is our opportunity to make a big difference and a serious difference to help and promote our community and the health of our community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I hope that answered the question.
For sure, I think so.
It's hard.
So
This is tough.
Yeah, so another tough one is, what words would you use to describe COVID to a child who is afraid?
Who's afraid? Words to use to describe COVID to a child who's afraid. Okay. So I would explain, depending on the age of the child, I would explain this. When you grow up and when you go to school and when you're out doing daily life, sometimes we get sick. And sometimes we get sick with colds, right? Common cold, right? This is an example, COVID's an example of a pretty serious big cold, a big cold. A cold that it really hits the entire body hard. So not just like your breathing pattern, but really just how you walk, your head, everything. It hits everything in a big way. It's a pretty big and horrific cold that really hits hard and really has hit people in a major way. And so that's how I would first describe it, because that's really what it is. It's a serious major cold that actually this virus is from the class and from the group of what's called coronaviruses. It's actually another type of coronavirus that causes the common cold, if you think about it, right? And so this one is just on steroids, you would say. That's how I would describe it to a child. And that's why, in this case, we really want to make sure we stay protected, because this one is more contagious than like ever before.
I think that'd be a good way to explain it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Carla, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I was just thinking, when you have a child that comes in and there's a possibility they have COVID, parent, there may be an outbreak at their family, in their home, how do you treat that? How do you go about, handling a situation like that?
Oh, if they're in my office?
Yeah.
Like if they already come in? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and please know that happens. Like that happens. And sometimes we find out later, oh, they're COVID positive. which when that's the case, we still are going to do our job. So if I find out you have COVID or I feel like you have symptoms, I'm going to still do what I have to do in that office visit. Like, I'm still going to address some concerns. We're going to make sure we have precautions, though. And you see, and for me, that's why I already come in at a certain level. Like, I already wear a gown, I wear a face shield, it's because you never know who you're going to interact with, right? And what they may have. So I am already, just like the previous question, if I walk outside, I'm already going to have a certain way about myself and walk in a certain way and mask in a certain way. So we're going to make sure we, do what we have to do. But then there are certain numbers I know I would have to call in terms of, I think there is a risk. We need this child tested. There is then a protocol in place, making sure, all right, family, this is what's up. And then usually what happens is now, since COVID has existed, the Department of Health gets notified because they need to keep track and they need to let other family members know, right? And so there's a system about it in terms of if a child may have it, who's going to get tested next? The parents, any other family members, whoever lives in that house, we go down that entire process. And in the meantime, while you're waiting for the result, that's when you quarantine or isolate until you know the results. So there are specific rules with that, because that even happens with colleagues, right? I could be working in a colleague, I get home, I get notification, hey, I have symptoms, I'm about to get tested. I'm like, all right, got it. So I'm going to do what I have to do. And I'm going to, let people know. That actually happened. That's happened a couple times where I've had to then reach out to employee health. Like, I think this is what happened. Let me know my next step. And they let me know. I've had to go in and get tested once. I've had to, follow the rules, stay at home until the result comes in. That happens. That does happen.
Yeah. Another question
that's not going to stop care, though. That's the thing. I want to make sure families know we're not going to delay care because we find out someone has COVID. That's because that's malpractice. You can't do that. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Carl.
And people shouldn't delay. I mean, if they feel something's wrong, they need to call you immediately. They really do. I know some people are concerned that, well, let's just wait it out. It might be just a cold. Call and your pediatrician, call, and get some answers as soon as possible. Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask about was, and this is something that comes up in our Wellness Wednesday discussions all the time, and that is your own personal wellness and health. I mean, taking your vitamins and, exercising and, in our community, in some ways, we have certain diseases because we don't do some of those things and we don't take care of our wellness. What can we do with our kids to help them be stronger and, so if they do become infected, they can fight it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. So through this winter, though I know some people are excited, we may be getting close to being done. But I do think, some families, I've had a lot of families where at some point there's always a video game, right? And I'm like, what are we doing on these video games? And so what are you doing on that Xbox? But let's use it to our advantage, right? So I've had some families, if you're able to afford it, if not, we'll work, let's try to work with you. Let's be physical then with using some of those video games. Like if we're going to use Google Chromebooks and other, devices for our education, because a lot of things had to be remote for a lot of our kids, then let's use them for physical activity as well, right? I agree with you. That's why in the meantime, while we're waiting on a vaccine, let's take care of ourselves. What are we eating? What are we getting from the grocery store? What's really a necessity to buy from the grocery store? Is junk food a necessity? Let's think about that, right? And please know, I'm preaching to myself, right? Because I had gained weight earlier and I had to work through it, right? Like, this is not acceptable. And so, what other activities can we do? I remember with one child in the room, I don't know if they're watching now, but I was like, what's a burpee? Like, we went and did burpees in the office visit. Like, we went into a downward dog in the one visit. There are some things where you don't need electronics and you don't need those devices, right? That you can still do and become physically active, right? That's really important. And let's make sure we're doing it as a family. So be the model, right? Don't just tell them to do it. No, you be the model. Let's do it as a family event. Let's all take time away from a device, from the television, from something, and do something together as family and really plan that time. So as we plan to wake up to go to work, we plan to hopefully go to bed, we plan for other things that we think are of necessity, you have to plan that intentionally. Plan the time, that family time for physical activity, for healthy eating together. That's really important because then you'll have great memories from that too. And that's what children will remember, right? And then they'll think back to that because everybody's going to remember this pandemic when we go years out. They're going to remember the time from this. Let's just be honest, right? And so let's create great memories in a healthy way. Our bodies are our temples, right? So that's the goal there.
Okay. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I just, I have to just throw that in there because, I've heard it the last time we had our doctors on talking about vaccinations, and it always comes up that we have to really take care of ourselves so that if it happens, we can fight it. We can fight it ourselves. So, Dr. Walton, I just wanted to thank you so much. This was really some great information. Paige, was there any other questions in the chat before we start
Yeah,
rolling out?
one more quick
Okay.
question. It's just for
Sure.
Dr. Watson. What are your thoughts on school districts going back in person 5 days a week? I know that kind of just
I
came
was waiting
out.
for that
It's
question.
new.
I was waiting.
Yeah.
I was waiting for
I
that.
wasn't going to
No,
ask it. I wasn't going to ask it.
no. It's fine. It's fine. So actually, as last year, and I'll put it out there. It's cool. In my NMA pediatric section chair duties, but actually working with our national president at the time, who's immediate past, but our current president now, who's actually in Columbus, Dr. McDougall, knows this. We actually had a press release in terms of schools reopening. And that, to be honest, I'm a fan of schools reopening. I always will be, as long as we're equitable about it. And this is what I mean. Before the pandemic, we already knew there were inequities in our schools. And I feel when the pandemic hit, we already knew this, but it just exacerbated it 10 times more, right? And so my goal is, yes, let's open the schools, but how are we making sure those schools are safe? How are we making sure our children and our staff, our teachers, our administrators are safe? And are we investing appropriately? So some of this will take money, right? I think schools are it's the great point where health, education, economy all come together. And so that's why I believe we all were hitting hard last year, and probably every other provider that came on Wellness Wednesday was probably touching on this all last year, the importance of voting, right? The importance of being engaged in our communities, being engaged in what's happening at our local, state, and federal governments, because that's what's important. We want to make sure if we're taking our children to school, let's make sure we equip the schools accordingly and make sure it's equitable, whether it's a public school, whether it's a private school, whether it's a charter school, I don't care what school it is, our children have the right and our teachers have the right to be safe and make sure it's in it and make sure we're effective. And I always then will ask the question, all right, open the schools. And when you have a positive COVID exposure, what's your protocol? Because it's coming. It's going to happen, right? And so what's your plan? What is the plan for that? And if that's not clear, then let's make it clear. What do we need to do to make sure it's clear? Because you're right. We got parents who need to go to work, who are working a couple jobs, right? To make things, make ends meet. So that is important, but let's be equitable about it. So I'm a fan. I want our kids to go back to school. I would never say I don't want our kids in school. I want our kids in school, specifically our kids with intellectual and developmental needs and special needs. They need to be in school. They need to be in school. In person would be the best. Let's just make sure we're equitable about it. Rural, urban, suburban, I don't care. We need to make sure equity across the board. Hope that answered that question.
All our children are safe. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad we got that one out there. Any others?
That was it. That was a good way to wrap it up.
Absolutely. Okay, Dr. Walton, why don't you just summarize pretty much what we talked about today, and then we're going to wrap things up. I know, right? We talked about it, but we talked about
everything. No, that's great.
Let's not say summarize, but why don't you just give us some lasting thoughts before we go?
Got it. I'll say this. It's been a pleasure being with you all. And I'm coming representing myself as Dr. Jennifer Walton, not any institution. Please know that right now. Though I love where I work and I love who I'm a member of. And people always say physicians, I'm an expert in this because I do specialize in certain things. There is only one expert physician, as we all know, and there's only one ultimate physician, and we all know that, right? And so, and only on one ultimate provider, and that makes all the difference in the world, right? So I think if we rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, constant in prayer, that's real, and I take that seriously as a provider. I hope we all take it seriously. I take it seriously as a patient to my provider. And so I think we need to do that in every aspect. I understand people's hesitancy. And at the same time, we know what's already happened in society over the years. And we've known what's happened to people of color. And we just know what's happened to people in general. This is our opportunity to have that daring faith. This is our opportunity to step out on that daring faith. Let's get vaccinated when it's our turn. Let's keep our children lifted up while we wait. And while children still have questions and are waiting, let's make sure they have our undivided attention. Let's be great listeners. Let's, make sure they're open. Make sure they know that they can come to you in safety, even when they're hurting, and whether it's not related to COVID or not. They're watching us. So I feel for the parents that have to work 2 or 3 jobs. I feel for you. And I know it's hard, and I know you've been exposed to a lot. And I'm praying for you. And that's what we need to focus on. Let's really all come together as a team. I know I could speak like this because I'm talking to my church family and I'm a member of New Salem. So that's why I'm speaking the way I am right now. Let's stay prayed up. We're going to get through this. And let's step out on faith and really be there for each other in our communities. That's how I'm going to end that. Is that all right?
Oh, that was perfect. Thank you so much. That was wonderful, Dr. Walton. Then, Paige, did you have anything you want to say before we go?
Yeah, all the questions are answered. That was great information. Even though, I mean, I don't have kids, but I'm a student, so it was great to hear and be reminded of the things that we should all be doing to get through this.
Absolutely. It's been a
But
rough.
we got to keep
It's been a rough
encouraging
year.
ourselves.
You got to keep
It's been a rough year.
It's been a rough
Let's do it.
year, but you know what? Yeah, but hey, we're going to get through it, and we have gotten through it already. He's brought us through, so we're good.
That's
So
right.
I thank you again, Dr. Walton, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Great questions in the chat. I'm sure we'll have you back again, Dr. Walton, because this was some great information. This was extremely helpful. In fact, we'll probably have you back when we get that vaccination for our kids. And we
Yeah.
can really talk about it. Yeah, that would be wonderful. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And as always, stay healthy and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Be safe.